Hello. In this video, we are going to make a login page, and what I did is I'm going to give you the code. I put the starter code on the web page that goes with this video, so you can find this code that I'm looking at right here. You can find it on the web page. Should be right underneath the video. Okay, now we're going to create a page to put this code into. So right here, right click on your pages folder and create a page called loginpage.js, or maybe I should say a component called loginpage.js, just like that. Okay, so go ahead and create that file in the pages folder and then paste in the code, and here's the code. And now you should recognize all of this code by now. That's why I'm giving it to you, so that we can just talk about it and hopefully save a little bit of time right here. But this is going to be a login page, and we're starting out with it looking like this. So you can see that we've got two state variables here, username and user password, like that. And then down in the JSX, what we return is a form. And the form has two inputs, one for username and one for password. Okay, so here is the first input. I didn't really do anything to make this look nice, obviously. I'm not really concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the functionality. But there's the input where you enter your username. And now this is a controlled component because at the moment it is. We're going to change that later. But the state is in sync with the user interface. They're locked together here because here we're setting the value of the input to that state variable. And whenever the value in the UI changes, we're triggering this event handler right here. And that's automatically setting the state variable to whatever the value that's entered into the target here. So this is what we call a controlled component, where the UI and the state are locked together. Okay, now I'm going to show you that we don't necessarily need that in all cases, but a lot of React components are built that way. Okay, so here's the input for the username right there. And then here is the input for you to enter the password. Same thing right here. It's the UI and the state are locked together, and this is a controlled component. The other thing that I did right here is I stringified the username and the user password state variables just so we could see how those are changing and how they're staying in sync with the UI. So we'll see that in just a second here. But first, we want to set this up so that we can navigate to this page in our project. Okay, so the next thing that I want you to do is go into app.js. And now I've already done this, but you're going to have to add a route to the login page. So go ahead and add a route element like that, and make sure you get the path right, and make sure you get that element prop correct, because that's real easy to mess up if you're not careful. But here we have the element prop. That's right there. And then what we're doing is we're saying that when someone navigates to the /login path, we're going to display the login page. Okay, so set that route up. You also need to import it, so make sure you don't forget to import it, otherwise you'll get an error. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to update our nav bar so that somebody can see on a link to get to the login page. So once you're done updating app.js, go on over to the nav bar component, which is in the components folder. And then what I've done here is I just added a space. This is real ugly, but I'm not really concerned about the appearance right now. We can bootstrap it later or use AI to make some really nice style sheets. But anyways, here is the nav link that you want to add, and then you should be good to go here. Okay, so save all your files and then check it out in the browser. Here I have it here, and I'm already at the login page, so I'm going to hit the back button here and refresh. So now here we go. Here's our link, and we set up a route to the login page, so I click on that. Now notice that I didn't put all the page components in here. I didn't use the main layout because I wasn't sure exactly, sometimes you just want to have a login screen before somebody can see anything, such as the header and the footer and stuff like that. So I just made this page so that it's not using that main layout. It's just showing the login form and nothing else. Okay, you can see here if I type something in, It's automatically in sync with the state. You can see that the state is automatically getting updated. So every time you make a keystroke, it's re-rendering the component and updating, returning new JSX that has all this stuff in it. So, okay, so you're doing a lot of rendering when you have controlled components. Every time there's a keystroke, it re-renders the component. You may not always want that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to hack this apart, and we're not going to use state variables for now. I'm going to show you another way you can do it so that this is what we're going to use is called the useRef hook. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the state variables altogether. Now the difference between the state variables and using the useRef hook is that useRef will not if the reference changes, it doesn't trigger a re-render. So you guys know that if your state changes, it triggers the component to re-render, which means it reruns the component function and returns the updated JSX along with the state changes that occurred. So if we want to avoid all that continuous rendering, we can use useRef. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let's just delete the two state variables. Just delete those two right there. And then we're also going to have to go to our inputs here, and be careful when you do this. We can get rid of the value attribute and the onChange attribute. And we'll go back to, I'm just going to do it. Let's just start out like this. So actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the input element all on its own line like this. Okay, and make it real easy to read. Okay, and then let's do the same thing here for the password. So I'm going to remove the value and the onChange props or attributes, whichever you want to call them. And then I'm just going to go back to a one-liner like this. Okay. Now I don't need that stringify anymore because I don't have these state variables, so I'm going to delete that as well. Okay, so here I'll show you how the useRef hook works. So scroll back up, and now we need to import it here. So I could get rid of useState right there because we're not using it anymore, but we will be using it later in another video. So I'll leave it there, but I'm going to import the useRef hook like that. And then what it allows us to do, I'll show you how we set this up. Now this is a little bit weird too, just like everything else in React. But I'm going to create two constants here using that hook. So I'm going to go const user name ref, and I'm going to set it equal to calling that useRef hook or function that we just imported. Okay, so there's the first one, user name ref, and I'll just initialize it by calling that useRef hook. Okay, and then I'm going to create another one for the password. So it's going to be const user password ref equals, and then I'm going to call the useRef hook. Okay, so what this gives me is I can use these variables to get a reference to the input elements. So it's a little bit weird, but I want to tie this to this input, and I want to tie that variable to this input right here. So here's how we can link those. Go to the first text input and add a ref prop to it. So go ref equals curly braces, and then we're going to link that to the user name ref. So inside the curly braces, put user name ref. Okay, and then go down to the password text box, and let's link that to the user password ref. So I add a ref attribute or prop, and then use curly braces, and then I'll call this one user password ref like that. Okay, so these variables now represent those two inputs. They're references to the inputs, but it's actually an object that has a reference to these user inputs. I'll show you what I mean in just a second here. Okay, let me show you how these are actually references that reference the inputs that we set these to right here. So I'm actually going to use useEffect right here. So I want to do something when the component renders. So I'm going to use useEffect like that, and luckily it imported useEffect for me up top, I noticed. Otherwise you have to do that by yourself. Now useEffect takes a callback function for the first parameter, and a dependency array for the second parameter. So go ahead and put those two parameters in just like that, and then split apart the curly braces here. So I want to leave the dependency array empty, which means that this is going to this callback function is going to get triggered on when the component mounts and displays on the screen right here. So what I want to do here is I want to set the focus on the username so that the user doesn't have to do that manually with the mouse. So here's how I can do that. I can take that username ref right here, and now to actually access the input element that this is referencing, they made this an object that has a current property. I don't really know why they did this. It seems kind of strange to me, but right here, if I access the current property of this ref object, that is going to be the input element, just like when you get a handle on it with document.getElementById. So what I could do here is I could set the focus on it. So let's see what this does. Okay, if you save this and then reload the page in the browser, you should see that the focus is going to get set on that text box right there. Okay, so you can use the useRef hook to get a reference on input elements so that you can do things like, I suppose you could do other things like add event. Well, you wouldn't want to do that in React, I don't think. Anyways, it's a reference to one of the elements on the page. Okay, and you have to go through the current property to get to it. Very strange, but whatever. All right, so now I want to show you how we can handle the form submits right here. Here's what I want you to do. Go to the opening form tag and add an onSubmit prop to it. And then we are going to call a function that we're about to define here, and let's call it handle submit. Okay, so that's we need to define this handle submit function. So I'm going to go right up here and define it. I guess I'll use an old school function this time. So I'll use the function keyword and call it handle submit. And now this is an event handler function, so it's going to get that EVT prop. So I'm going to go ahead and add that EVT prop that you're all well aware of right now. And then since this is a single page web application, we want to prevent the default behavior of the form submit because these are React apps and it's a single page application and you never want to go to a different page. So we want to take the EVT parameter and call prevent default, which you're all comfortable with by now, hopefully. Okay, so that'll keep us on the page without doing a refresh. And then now, normally at this point, we would do some form validation. I'll show you that in another video here. I'm just going to put a to-do comment and make it say validate the user input. We'll do that later. Okay, but right now what I want to show you is how we can extract the data that was entered into the form. And now remember, we're not using state, so I can't get it from state variables because I'm not using state variables. But here's what I can do. I can go const username equals, and I'm going to refer to our username ref. So I'll type in username ref, and then to get to the actual input element that this is referencing, I have to go through the .current property, which I don't understand, but whatever, that's a React thing. Then I can get the value of that input box. So I'll just put that there, and that'll give me the value that's entered into that first input box. I'll do the same thing for the password. So I'll declare a constant, I'll call it user password, and I'm going to refer to the user password ref here. So I'm going to go equals user password ref dot current dot value. Okay, still don't understand why I have to use, why they made that current property actually store a reference to the input element. Okay, looks like I spelled password wrong, so I want to fix that real quick. Okay, and now just to show you that this is working, I'm going to console log those two variables. Console log username and then user password. Okay, save that. Alt tab back over to the browser and pull up the console log. And now look, as I type in, there's no re-rendering happening. That's the thing about using useRef, is it doesn't cause any re-renders. And in my mind, that would be more efficient than re-rendering all the time when a keystroke occurs. But anyways, here I'll enter something. And now I'm going to trigger the submit handler right here, and that's going to extract the value from those two inputs, and it should console log them, and there's what I typed in. So this is nice if you don't necessarily want to use controlled components and you don't need to re-render all the time. And then also the thing I like about this is I don't really care about capturing the data as the user types. Like with controlled components, what I care about is capturing the data that they enter when they press the submit button. And that's what we're doing here is we're not re-rendering, we're not tracking every keystroke, but we're just going to capture their user input through these useRef variables like that. Okay, let's just do one more thing here to kind of simulate what would happen if this was a real login. So at this point, once we validated the user input, which we'll do in the next video, and extracted the username and user password that was entered. At this point, what we would do is we would probably make an AJAX call to our backend server to authenticate the user that just logged in. I'm not going to get into that now. We'll get into that later. But let's just pretend, let's do it this way instead. So this is real simplified and you would never use this in the real world. But let's just say that the user name and password is hard-coded right here. I'll show you what I mean right here. Put an if statement right here under that console log, and let's say if username is double equal to, Betty, and then we'll say, and user password is double equal to Open Sesame. Okay, so I'm hard coding the username and password into this React component, which you would never want to do, but I'm just showing you what we would do if we were actually authenticating a user. So here's how we're authenticating a user. We're just checking to see if they entered Betty and Open Sesame. Okay, at that point, what we would do is we would redirect them probably to the home page. I'm not really sure how we'd want to handle this, but if they've authenticated, there's usually a redirect to some page that they can't get to without authenticating. So here's how we can redirect right here. I'm going to import the useNavigate hook. Now that comes from a different NPM package. If I go import useNavigate, now that one comes from the, I don't know how this got here, that's weird, but this is what I want right here. So we've used this a few times, but this is how you can programmatically navigate from one route to another here. This allows us to, what we have to do right here, I'll put it, doesn't really matter where I put it, I'll put it right here, I guess, but I want to do this, const navigate equals useNavigate. So useNavigate. Okay, so it's kind of weird. You call this function and it returns a function that we typically call navigate. Okay, and then I can use this navigate function to programmatically redirect us to a different route right here. So down here, if they've entered Betty and Open Sesame, we'll go ahead and we'll call navigate. And I guess we'll just navigate to the home page. So I can pass in a path to where we want to navigate to. And that's kind of how we would go about handling a login here. Now, again, we would do an AJAX call rather than just hard coding the username and password in here. But this works for just for these demonstration purposes. Go ahead and save these changes. And now you're going to see whenever you're dealing with passwords, you're going to see the browser wanting to save it all the time. That's kind of annoying. I don't know how you can disable that, but that would be nice if we could. Okay, what do they have to enter? Okay, capital B, Betty, and then Open Sesame, all lowercase. So here, I'll go ahead and enter Betty, and then Open Sesame, and I'll hit enter, and you can see that it redirected me to the home page. Okay, I've got a warning here that has to do with something else. I'll have to look at that later. And then again, you will see this all the time in the browser, but hope maybe we can disable that somehow. Okay, what would we do if the username and the password were not correct? Well, at that point, we could take care of that with our input validation. We'd want to display a message saying that your input is not valid. We don't have that valid user. I'm going to talk about the input validation in the next video. Okay, so anyways, the main idea behind this video was to learn that you can use the useRef hook if you don't need to have your state in constant synchronicity with your UI. So a useRef comes in a little handy. It's a little bit weird. So again, you have to call the useRef function to get reference variables, and then you assign those to usually a text box or something in the user interface by adding that ref attribute right there. And so that means that we're going to use that username ref variable as a reference to this input. And then to actually get to that input, we have to go through the ref variable, and then it gives it a current property, and that current property is the input. So you know that hopefully you know that you can call like a focus method on an input in JavaScript, and so we're calling the focus method on that input right here with that line of code, and also we're extracting the value out of those input elements just like you would in regular JavaScript. But here we have to do it through the ref variable, and then we have to go through this current property. I'm not sure why we have to do that, but that's the way we have to do it. There's probably a reason for it. But anyway, so that's how useRef works.